Hello, my name is Daniel Barr. I'm from RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. There's been lots of changes to research integrity and policies in Australia recently, so it's my pleasure to speak with you about principles-based research integrity governance in Australia. There are many different terms used to express the ideas we're talking about, such as trustworthy research, ethical research, fair research. Well, in Australia, we use the term research integrity interchangeably with the term responsible research. When we use these terms, we mean to convey the idea of the coherent and consistent adherence to a set of principles so that research can be trusted. The term research ethics in Australia is used to describe the processes for ethics review and approval by committees, researchers applying and getting review and approval to work with human participants or to use and care for animals for scientific purposes. It's interesting, all research appears to have impact, and the impact or changes brought about by research appear broad and unpredictable. An example of this is Wi-Fi and the research that underpins Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is wonderful. It's ubiquitous everywhere and has had a huge positive impact on our lives. If you look at the research that underpins Wi-Fi, what you find is that Wi-Fi is related to advances in radio astronomy and to the invention of the cochlear implant. And if you look back even further, you find that all of these things, including Wi-Fi, are related to the development of World War II radar. The point of this is that the researchers developing radar would have never have expected Wi-Fi to come from their research. All research has impact. Because of this, we must be able to trust research. The research integrity governance landscape, the policies and codes and guidelines in Australia is like most places. It's actually quite complex. The overarching document is the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research. And underneath that are specific guidelines and instruments for things such as human research ethics, the care and use of animals, and other things. For human research ethics, working with humans, participants, their data or tissues, there are principles that must be adhered to, such as merit, justice, beneficence, and respect. The principles for working with animals and caring for them ethically are similar. There's also the 3 R's, replacement, reduction, and refinement, which inform ethical and responsible research with animals. The 2007 Australian Code provided guidance for researchers and institutions in terms of trustworthy research. Some of the advice the 2007 Australian Code provided was too detailed and was probably influenced too much by biomedical research and limited its usefulness for other disciplines in the humanities and social sciences. Interestingly though, the 2007 Australian Code mandated that institutions have advisors in research integrity. These research integrity advisors are researchers at institutions who can provide advice to other researchers who have concerns about the trustworthiness of research, such as authorship disputes and other things. The guidance provided by the 2007 Australian Code, however, for addressing research misconduct was in some places legally unsound. And during the time between 2007 and now, there have been 2 key developments that appear to have influenced the new Australian Code. One of these has been the development of the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity. The Singapore Statement on Research Integrity provides the principles and responsibilities for research integrity on one page. It was developed by the World Conferences on Research Integrity initiative. Another apparent influence on the new Australian Code was the development of a framework by the Canadian government. The tri-agency RCR framework by the Canadian government is about accountability in research, and it interestingly doesn't describe or use the term research misconduct. The principles of responsible research conduct provided by the Australian Code are provided at a very simple and clear level. The principle of honesty is clearly described around providing information truthfully. The principle of rigour describes doing research carefully and with thoroughness. The principle of transparency talks about being open and sharing information with others where you can. The principle of fairness is an important one in how researchers display professional courtesy and also how they recognise the contributions of others. The principle of respect in the Australian Code is very much related to human research ethics and the care and use of animals and the documents that I described earlier. The recognition of the right of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to be engaged in research is a key principle for Australia and Australian research. This is an important part of our history and who we are and how research can better integrate, be with our traditional owners. Accountability is seen in a number of other documents, and the principle of accountability is also described in the Australian Code. It talks about researchers and institutions following their duty and responsibility to fulfill the principles. Finally, the principle of promotion is used to describe the development of cultures and environments of responsible research cultures, both by individuals and by institutions. So there have been some key changes to the main document used by Australian institutions and researchers for trustworthy research. The new Australian Code is much more concise, shorter, and it's fully based on principles of research integrity. Why does this approach appear to be important to Australia and actually elsewhere across the world? Well, understanding the principles and the translation of the principles into responsibilities by researchers is a key thing to support trustworthy and ethical research. There's not very much evidence, but the evidence suggests that the translation of the principles of research integrity into practice by researchers is very complex and affected by things such as the personality of the individual, the amount of training or mentorship that they receive, and where they work. This results in a spectrum as researchers do their work, as they adhere to laws, they plan experiments, interact with others, and decide who will be the author of publications, to how they store data and provide access or sharing of that data, how they do peer review, and how they may report their concerns about the trustworthiness of research. So we see a spectrum of behaviour, a spectrum of variation in how the principles are translated into practice. This results in potentially excellent and trustworthy research. It results in sometimes poor research, things we shouldn't trust. And it also results in a large part in the middle, where researchers do things informed by the principles where they could have done them a little bit better. The other key change I mentioned was the idea that the Australian Code is influenced by a Canadian framework that doesn't use the term research misconduct. Well, how are Australian Code and Australian researchers being accountable for their research if they don't use the term research misconduct? Actually, by being influenced by the Canadian framework, we potentially have a better way of ensuring accountability. This is because the new Australian Code describes what potential breaches of research integrity as the things that researchers and institutions must address. This means that it's not just fabrication, not just falsification, not just plagiarism that must be considered. It's quite a lot of number of things in the middle part of the spectrum as researchers translate the principles into practice. This can be a number of things that are referred to as questionable research practices, like improper authorship, losing data, or not keeping confidentiality secure in peer review. So now, in Australia, we have a principles-based document that describes what the best type of research looks like for trustworthiness, potentially excellent research. And in doing so, it has allowed us to recognise and address potentially what research we shouldn't trust, and has provided us information about how to do that. I wish to thank my mentor and co-author, Dr. Paul Taylor, and I wish to thank you and wish you the best of luck for your research. 감사합니다.